The name of today's event is Women Humanitarians, Work and Culture in the West African Context. The topic of today's event is the importance of the participation of women in dealing in humanitarian crises. The presentation will be about half an hour, and we will get some insights into the field of humanitarian work in Sub-Saharan Africa and explore the dynamics within culture and work-life balance from the point of view of a native woman from that area who will illustrate the complexity of all these issues. And that already leads me to our guest of honor today. That is the remarkable Princella Arkor Godzi, who is currently the Deputy Course Director for courses of humanitarian assistance in West Africa at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Ghana, where she's working under the Humanitarian Assistance in West Africa project, which is funded by the Austrian Development Agency and supported also by the Austrian Ministry of Defense through the Austrian Center for Peace, for those of you who wondered where the connection to Australia is. Princella also holds a Master of Arts degree in Conflict, Peace, and Security Studies, and I believe also a bachelor degree in Political Science and French, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And several years of experience in the peacekeeping domain, since she also previously worked as a language consultant for the United Nations Department for Safety and Security in Ghana. And yeah, without further ado, I would like to hand over the virtual microphone to Princella. The floor is yours. You can start to share your presentation now.
Okay. Let's go. Thank you very much, Barbara, for the presentation. I hope everybody can hear me. I'll try to be as loud as possible.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for having me. And thanks for that introduction. But for the purpose of my discussion, to give relevance and perspective to my discussion this evening, I'd like to go on and say a few words about myself and then the work I do. So, as has already been mentioned, my name is Princella Arkor Godzi. I work on the HAWA project by the ACP and KIPTC in Ghana. Our main focus is on capacity building for all who are involved in disaster management. And by this, I mean men, women alike, and all components in terms of civil society, civilians, military, and police. Over the years, we have strived to achieve a good balance of gender in our courses. And we've gone extra miles to include women, looking at how difficult it is sometimes to get the representation of women in our courses. We've had to send the invitations in women groups and also encourage women to apply more. And also, I'd like to say that for the past course, for example, we had a good ratio of women to men. We were almost a par. That was 45 to 55% women to men ratio, which I think is very good. And we are working towards achieving more. Now I'm talking about the ratio of women here because I'd like to point that the course invites a lot of women humanitarians, which means in my interactions, I have met a number of women humanitarians in the courses. Also related to my activities, I travel in targeted countries in the Sub-Saharan Africa region on project activities to help implement projects in certain countries. And in these areas, I've had the valuable opportunity to meet women humanitarians who work from the grassroots. So this has permitted me to have proper insight and into their work-life balance And I've been able to gather a lot of similarities, which is why across these countries, which is why I refer to the West Africa sub-regions. And then I find I've reached up to 150 women on these trips, and I find it relevant and to share in a forum such as this, which is gender focused, so that others get to appreciate the challenges involved, the dynamics and complexities involved in work and culture of the humanitarian women in our part of the world. In terms of outline, this discussion, in terms of, let's start with background, it's going to be about, my discussion is going to be in 3 parts. I am going to be discussing in the next 20 to 30 minutes, very briefly, about what entails humanitarian work, and also give cultural underpinnings that tie down the woman, or that affect the woman humanitarian in my region. And then I'll go on to discuss the main part of the presentation, which is the discussion on the life and balance of women humanitarian in this area. And then I'll conclude by giving key points or highlights of my presentation, and then welcome contributions, ideas, and questions if there are any. Let me add here, or let me hasten to add here the caveat that my presentation is solely based on primary information that I have received and experiences I have witnessed by myself, and that this may not reflect same for every single woman humanitarian in the region. So I'm talking from a personal point of view with respect to women I have interacted with and what they have told me, and then what I have witnessed by myself. I'll move on now to the background. Now, the humanitarian work basically involves rendering assistance to people who have been hit by a crisis in a way that maintains their dignity. And according to this article by UN Women for during World Humanitarian Day in 2019, it is estimated that over 40% of humanitarian aid workers are women. And I find this as a good figure towards achieving an equal representation of men to women in the humanitarian sector. Why is this important? You know, let me talk a little about why it's important to have women representation. First of all, as we all know, when there are emergencies or crises or this kind of disasters, majority or the most people affected are women and girls, and of course children. But then women and girls form part of the main people affected by this crisis. And women, we know, have specific needs that can only, I dare say, only be understood by other women. So in order to address these issues, it's right that we have women address these issues by themselves. Let me give an example of, say, crisis, let's say women about maternal health, or about menstrual hygiene. This is a difficult topic if you ask a man to talk about. They might have all the facts, but they haven't experienced it, and this becomes difficult, you know. And it's easier for the woman victim, to absorb what is told her if it comes from a fellow woman. I would also want to say, for example, that in times of crisis, there is undoubtedly prevalence of sexual violence, and this sexual violence are usually perpetuated against women and girls. And trying to get these people to speak up is not as easy if talking to the opposite sex. So then it's just right to have women in these teams, women strongly represented to be able to address or help address these issues. I would also say that in terms of tradition, for certain conflict areas, the tradition doesn't allow that women talk to men. And in these areas, that's where women humanitarian come in handy, because here they serve as liaison between the emergency response team and then the affected women or the affected population. So briefly, this is why it's important for the women humanitarian to increase numbers or representation of women humanitarian. Now, let me talk about crisis, the kind of crisis that are usually that are recurrent or relevant to the West African sub-region. We usually have in terms of crisis, armed conflict, and natural disasters such as flooding, landslide, mudslide, and as well outbreak of diseases. Now, having said this, I'll talk about the life, the culture in a part of the world, which also forms part of my main discussion. So our society in my part of the world is strongly characterized by, the culture is strongly characterized by religion. So for example, in Ghana, the majority of Ghanaians, that's about 70% of the population are Christians. And so you realize that societal do's and don'ts are drawn from biblical principles. And this goes same for countries such as Niger and Mali, which are largely Islamic. So what's expected of population of women in this context is largely drawn from the Quran. I'll be making a lot of allusion in reference to Mali, Senegal, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, and of course Ghana, because these are mainly the areas where I have had the most interactions. So having talked about the culture, let me also highlight the influence of the patriarchy in society. Our societies are principally patriarchal. By this, I mean that for over the years, tradition has had it that the men are in places of authority, and then the men are considered superior to women in many ways, and this has been the tradition or the norm for so long. And then not forgetting the ever-present importance of marriage in our society. In our society, marriage is seen as mandatory. Marriage that comes with childbirth, both going together, are seen as mandatory for the woman. And so to be respected as a woman, it's not about career. You are seen more and you are respected more. Your family is respected more if you have a family and if you settle down. And then here again, the societal norms about the role of the woman in society or in terms of marriage is largely based on religion. So for Christians, for example, the woman is admonished to succumb to her husband and accept his authority and direction as head of the household. And this is the norm. You otherwise, this is how what is expected of you, and that's how it goes. That's same for the largely Islamic countries like Niger, Burkina, and then Mali. So I realize a lot of similarities as I share a lot of similarities with these countries, which is also why I put up these countries together. background, let me go to the main part of my discussion about how the native woman, or the one that strives to conform societal norms and values, manages or finds a way to exist. If I can say it that way. First of all, as a young lady growing up, you start receiving comments like, when are you married? When are you getting married? Do you have children? When are you having children? You have to start having children now before it gets late. And I have personally received a lot of these comments. They never end until you are married. So it's something we kind of get used to. So one time when women from across these countries I mentioned same experiences with me, I just smiled, because initially I thought it was just me, but apparently it's a similarity that goes across these countries. And I find it interesting how these people passing such comments do not bother to take into account the mental health or the general overall financial stability or overall well-being of the woman before passing such comments. According to society, once you're a woman and you're growing up, you're supposed to have married, start thinking of marriage and settling down and all of that. This point, so this gives you a clear indication of the importance of marriage and childbirth in our society. For the woman, marriage comes first before career. You have to consider this first before career, else it's not the norm to choose a career ahead of marriage, because you get very unfavorable comments. Now, talking about marriage in our context, let me first touch on the difficulty faced by a humanitarian woman who is trying to pursue a career and also trying to, in the same way, conform with societal expectations of her. First of all, in choosing a career, as humanitarian work involves traveling to areas in order to reach people who are potentially running away from crisis or armed conflicts. It involves a lot of travel. So this already starts as a discussion with the choice of a spouse. I have, let me show again personally how I have received this comment by my then boyfriend about my availability for him whenever he wants me, because the concern or the fear was that you're always traveling and then you might not have time for him. And it's interesting that it comes this way, because if we're the other way around, like for the man, it's not a big deal, because this is what is expected of the man. The man is seen as, you have the will, free will to travel and do whatever you want and to take care of your family. But the woman is supposed to be reserved for the woman. For the woman, it becomes a discussion. It has to be a discussion to be accepted in the first place. And for example, in Mali, some women have shared with me the same thing, but for them, it's even more intense, because these comments come from family. It comes from their mothers. It comes from their aunties about how you're traveling too much. You're only doing this work. You are, in your opinion, saving the world. But how about yourself? You have to think of settling down. You have to abort all of those plans, come back home, settle down, so that you can find a good husband, or so that this Mr. John, though interested in you, can come back home and then, marry you, which is what is expected of you. This already is a challenge in terms of finding a spouse. And also in certain Islamic homes, like in the predominantly Islamic countries, there are also the question of arranged marriages. So the dowry is already paid, it's already settled that this woman or this lady is being handed over to marriage, and in marriage to this man. And there are no questions about it. There are no prior discussions as to your take on it. So the woman doesn't get to interact with her future husband about prospects of career and all of that. This is not really seen as necessary because it's seen as the woman's responsibility to make her marriage work. Largely, nobody sees the man as the one responsible to make his marriage work. It's the woman's duty. So nobody really bothers about what your wishes are or what this, is supposed to look like. You just go in as has been arranged for you. And this already cuts off certain dreams and aspirations. People have to sometimes let go of their careers in terms to be able to, make their families and society happy. And if you are one that deviates from this already structured procedure in society, you are seen as a deviant. And some families actually see you as a disgrace, for going in your own direction or choosing to be successfully a successful professional in humanitarian sector instead of settling down and then getting married. Now, again, this is for those now going into marriage to conform. Let me talk about those already married. For the already married ones, there is the expectation of children, which is mandatory, almost mandatory for the woman. And yet, these children are seen largely as the woman's responsibility. Here again, the husband is not traditionally in the word duty bound to step in the woman's place whilst she travels to pursue career or on grounds of her work. It's more the woman's duty to stay home. And also the idea of caretakers, having somebody replace you in your absence in your home, is seen as non-traditional and sometimes unacceptable by certain families. So then the woman is bound to stay back home and then, forget career and stay back home and then worry about her husband and then her children. This is also one big difficulty for the woman. In Nigeria, I had this discussion with some women where they shared with me how a married woman had received an offer for a higher paying position in her organization, and sharing this with her husband. This could possibly be the turning point in their finances because this was a big offer. According to her, this was a very big offer. But on the contrary, her husband was not happy about it because in his opinion, he feared what the society would have to say about it, that the woman earning more meant the woman taking care of him instead of the other way around, or the woman taking care of the household, in that way belittling, his authority as the man of the household. And so he asked her to, turn down the offer, and in a way, as a way to try to balance the two, keep the career, keep the job, and then keep the marriage. The lady decided to involve all who could speak on her behalf to make her husband see or reason with her. But it still boils down to the same thing. It's at the end of the day, the end line was, if this is what you have to do to make your marriage work, just let it go and make the marriage work. The marriage comes first before anything else. And then this woman took the boldest decision. I must say, this was a very big, bold decision of deciding to go with the job instead of the marriage. And truly, she lost him. She lost her marriage and took the job. But follow-up says she was happy. And then according to her, it has been the one of the biggest decisions or the best decisions she's ever taken in her life. Let me stay in Nigeria. This other lady shared with me, she was working with the UN in the Borno state where there's the Boko Haram crisis. In her work, she's received a lot of comments from men and women alike about how it's unsafe for her to be in that region, despite security assured by the UN, and that with some saying she's in a better position, or it's better for her to go back home and then start a family, and that's even more profitable than, in quotes, wasting her life out there trying to save the world. I mean, these are realities. These are realities in a part of the world trying to balance this humanitarian work with what is expected of you by the society. Still on the question of childbirth, let me say what was shared with me by one Cameroonian, not necessarily West Africa, but she was mentioning how if, as a woman, you desire to fulfill your societal duty of having children in your marriage, it has been advised, they experience, women in discussion have decided it's a good idea to something to satisfy society, or to satisfy your family, to satisfy husband, to take the burden off your shoulders in the first place, into on the field, into the terrains, because in to run for safety, this people, victims of conflict and whatnot, run into very unhealthy, tough terrains, very hard terrains to reach, and this which require perhaps long hours of road travels on literally unmotorable roads, and like we see in the picture, like traveling miles in canoes, and things that in the long run affects the woman's biological well-being. So to be able to society, lessen your own burden by at least having a child first before thinking of venturing into this these kind of terrains. So having said this, let me also move to some measures some women have resorted to as a way to balance out their careers and societal, against this societal structures. So let me talk first about a discussion by some Senegalese women. So still on this matter, we were having a long chat, and then the final decision they thought was best for them was to relocate from the country. So it didn't really matter where, it could be a neighboring country or outside the continent, anywhere, just anywhere that takes them away from their various societies, relocating in order to have lessen their burdens and have the peace of mind to do career whilst the wait for a partner or a spouse as and when life permits it. And then also there has been the option for settling or choosing stay-home husbands. This was this came in a discussion with some women from Niger, where they shared how a colleague's marriage was doing well. Together with her career, she's managed because she's been able to find a spouse who was willing to be a stay-home husband to take care of the kids and the housework, whilst she freely had the opportunity to travel for work and then pursue her career. And I must say, this is a very bold decision by a man, and this is really difficult if you'd ask me, because of the context we find ourselves, because it attracts mockery, from your fellow men, from society, as not a weakling and not being wife enough, a man enough, and then taking wifely duties when you have a wife. But this was working. This is working fine for them. And then also one Malian shared with me the resort to considering polygamy. Polygamy is very, very common in a part of the world. So this is where a man has more than one wife. And in her opinion, it's easier to have a spouse that has a number of women at his disposal. so that you are not compelled or duty bound to settle and just do housework when your passion or desire is more for pursuing humanitarian work. So this way, at least there are other women in your absence that take care of wifely duties that is expected of you. And then that way, perhaps a presence would not be felt so much, and that she would be free to do as she pleases. These are certain coping mechanisms some women have adopted, but unfortunately for others, they've had to let go of completely the career or any other aspirations of pursuing humanitarian work just to make their marriages work and be seen as conforming to the societal structures. Under the HOWA project, taking into consideration these difficulties, we have also included in the last review certain modules. We included a module, for example, on self-care for humanitarians, understanding that there are these difficulties on the field, and so we're training them in a way to be able to find a balance between or manage the balance between the difficulties on the field as well as their homes, in order to avoid a burnout. And also specifically for the women, we co-created a workshop where they were at ease or free to share their personal difficulties or their challenges, the challenges involved in their work as against their cultures in their various countries, and learn from the similarities and learn from how others have resolved it, and practice same by themselves. And this has been really successful because in feedback, we have received a number of good evaluations on how this has helped a number of them to maintain this balance and keep their head on their neck, if I should use that way, and then even go further in their career. So this has been a contribution as on the HOWA project to addressing this kind of issues. Well, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm already concluding my discussion, and I'd like to do so by referring to key points in my discussion. In my discussion, I spoke about how humanitarian work involves responding to crisis, people in crisis, and ensuring, whilst respecting their dignity, and at the same time, the essence of having women represented. This is because they understand issues of those who are mainly affected more, that's women and girls, and makes it easy to help address these issues. I also spoke about the kind of society that runs across the West African sub-region, which is largely patriarchal and sees the man as the head and his authority recognized, and as well as is watched over that of the woman, and also of the fact that marriage plays an integral part of our society, and principles on expectations of women and in our society is largely drawn from societal norms that are also based on religion or religious principles. So the woman is taught how to, in terms of comportment and all of that, based on largely religious principles. I also mentioned give a few examples of how some women have managed to measures they've adopted to cope with these societal expectations, and then also manage their career at the same time. And to draw a conclusion or to finalize my presentation, I'd like to repeat what I said earlier about the relevance of my discussion, being that these are issues that are facing women. And so in a forum such as this, I find it very relevant to bring it to light in order to welcome other perspectives of how it's done elsewhere, or to appreciate these issues and find support, or find a way to maintain or increase, if not maintain, the women representation or woman-man ratio in the humanitarian sector. So that's all for me for this evening. Thank you very much for your attention.